Blessings, good evening. Tonight we have some questions have come in, so do our best to answer. Lumpur, it seems like the world is becoming more violent and is in a terrible state. What can we do? Sounds like you're describing a sick person, maybe. So sick people need care and attention, medicine, rest, loving kindness. That's what the world needs. The physical world and the world of people, the population. So, the Buddha's explanation, where does anger, violence, conflict come from? It comes from ignorance. If we knew the consequences of our actions, we wouldn't think it, we wouldn't say it, we wouldn't do it. Anger and thoughts rooted in greed, anger, delusion, or ignorance, they lead to our harm and the harm of others. So when we give in to our anger, we are harming ourselves, making karma. Sometimes it's instant karma, quickly comes back, sometimes takes longer. And that's one reason why ignorance continues in the mind, is because we don't realize what we're doing, maybe until it's too late, and we have to receive the consequences of our actions. But this is nothing new. The world was a violent place, and there was a lot of anger in people's minds in the time of the Buddha. It's nothing new, it's part of our human conditioning. But what's different is there's a lot more people in the world than in the time of the Buddha. So perhaps that gives the impression that there's more problems because there's more people around, so there's more competition for resources, more arguments over beliefs and views and opinions, therefore more conflict. And of course technology has developed so that we know more about what's going on around the world at any one time. And so if you choose to look at the news, follow news, it seems maybe that the world is a terrible place, because news tends to focus on what's wrong. The wars, the crime, the problems, social problems, economic problems, and so on. You can, of course, use technology for good things like this, for spreading Dhamma, facilitating the practice of Dhamma. It's possible to join a meditation retreat online these days and sit meditation in silence with a lot of other people online. Assuming you've got your eyes closed, you're not going to see them, but at least you know they're there, out somewhere in the world, online. And if there's any teachings or a Q&A session like this, well, you can hear it. That's one of the benefits. But of course, technology can also bring us bad news and images of conflict, violence, war. It can also stimulate our greed. So you see what other people are doing and getting, maybe you want part of that. And when we don't understand karma and cause and effect, then it can lead us to act in unskillful ways. So greed can fuel violence as well. Anger fuels violence, and deep down it's all fueled by ignorance. So the Dhamma, practice of the Dhamma, listening to the Dhamma, is the ideal remedy. Of course, not everyone is interested in the Buddha and his teachings, but if you are, then you've got your solution to the world's problems right there. cultivating the Noble Eightfold Path, sila, virtuous behavior, mindful behavior of body and speech, and then cultivating mindfulness and insight to free your mind from the influence of the anger that underlies any kind of violent, aggressive behavior. So one practice I'd recommend is when you see other people getting angry, whether it's in person or online, come back to yourself. So ask yourself, do I have that intention still in my mind? Can I still get angry? Could I be violent? Do I have those thoughts, those intentions still in my mind, conditioning my mind? So you come back to yourself all the time, checking yourself, reflecting on your own behavior, body, speech and mind. And that's the way we can improve the world, starting from the inside, going out. We do what we can to encourage other people to be kind to each other, cooperative, patient with the difficulties of life, seek solutions in a non-violent way. And on a small level, you may be successful with the people around you, but on a wider level, we may not be able to do much, but we can do something with ourselves. Every time you abandon an angry thought, angry intention, every time you're patient with your desire to inflict any kind of verbal or physical harm on others, that's a victory. And the Buddha said that's the greatest victory for a human being. The victory over their own mind. Restraining angry impulses, aggression, and so on. More valuable a victory than just having victory over others. So just on a practical level, maybe look at less news, just keep to the headlines and occasional news items so that you're not overwhelming yourself with negative images and news. And keep focusing on what is good in yourself. The Buddha said, think about that which is worthy, the good stuff. That which is admirable. Think of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the teachings, qualities that bring your mind skillfulness, qualities that bring up mindfulness, compassion, wisdom and so on. That's our responsibility, and nobody else can do that for you. So there's plenty for us to do in our practice to deal with this question. Next question. Buddhism seems to be old-fashioned and full of rituals to many people. How can we get beyond that? Well, it can be like that, of course, like anything in life can be full of rituals, habitual behavior, acting, just following others maybe without really thinking deeply about what we're doing. You know, I think that is part of the unenlightened human condition, wherever you are, whatever your faith or belief or interests are. You know, we have rituals like you know, how you eat your food. You know, some people always eat with knife and fork, some people always eat with their hands. How you drive your car, how you go about your business, all kinds of rituals we're doing anyway. It's just when you're looking at a religion, an organized religion, sometimes it's an easy target. So you say, oh, a lot of ritual, empty ritual, chanting, doing things in a certain way. maybe not so immediately attractive to some people. And that's quite possible, because sometimes rituals do we attach too much to rituals, we lose track of what they're for. But a ritual can be a very useful means to get people to come together sometimes. So like, say, a funeral ritual or a blessing ceremony on some occasion where people come together to do something good, can be a very skillful thing as well. But we also have to remind ourselves why we're coming together, why we're performing that ritual, what is the meaning. And of course, some rituals are coming from a place of misunderstanding, or they're even harmful. So like, the Buddha spent a lot of time encouraging people not to sacrifice animals to keep the gods happy and to get things that they want from the gods. So some rituals can be like that. They're very harmful and you're making bad karma. So they're just pointless when you come to understand the Buddhist teachings. They don't make sense at all. But other rituals may be quite useful. So like Buddhist ceremonies, often we begin a ceremony by chanting Namo Tassa Bhagavato, which is homage to the Buddha, the perfectly enlightened, self-enlightened Buddha, the Blessed One. Just remembering the translation of those words, or remembering those words, can bring up very wholesome, skillful states of mind. Maybe it's something, some people, they die reciting Namo Tassa Bhagavato. It holds their mind at the time when they're at the end of their life, and they might at another time be suffering. The mind may be full of anxiety or fear, but they recite those words. So if it's something, some rituals you repeat through your life and they help you to become mindful, to have a skillful way that you can use at times, say like when you're afraid or stressed or ill, they remind you of good things. So like the ritual of undertaking 5 precepts with a monk or nun, you might go to refuge in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, then you recite the phrases of the verses of the 5 precepts. And if you do it a lot, it could seem boring, and you may not need to do it a lot because you know the 5 precepts, but it can be a way to get many people to focus their mind and do something good, to recollect their sila, their precepts, their actions, and determine to undertake good actions. So if a ritual is done with mindfulness and with understanding, it can be a helpful thing for you personally, and also for when people come together as a group. It gives them some structure, something to focus on. But the other side is they can become just a blind attachment, and we want to try and avoid that by developing more self-awareness, mindfulness, investigation. So chanting can be like that. Some people say, well, I've done my chanting for the night, I've made my merit, I'm good. But they still have a mind that's full of confusion or anger or worry, because they don't use the ritual, say, of chanting some verse of the Buddha or in praise of the Buddha, for example. They don't use that as a way to develop further insight or mindfulness or insight. They do it more as just ticking the box. I've done my chanting, now I can go to bed. And actually, even that much could still be a skillful thing to do, but there's a danger of falling into complacency with rituals, especially things you repeat over and over again, and you feel like you've just ticked the box, you've done the thing, now you're good, nothing more I need to do, kind of thing. We go to sleep, we go complacent, whether we actually go to sleep or we just go to sleep in our mind because of the habitual nature of the ritual. Could be either. But rituals can be like that. They can just become a little bit perfunctory, habitual, and it's up to each one of us to use them skillfully. So teachers will try and encourage people to reflect on what they're doing and use a ritual, any kind of activity that you might call a ritual skillfully. But it can also become an attachment, a blind attachment. So the word Ajahn many teachers in Thailand use for when you blindly attach to rituals, you're kind of fumbling around like someone in the dark. You're blind, you're meaning there's no light, you don't know what you're doing or why, what the purpose is. And so you're moving around a room in the dark, you bump into things, you knock things over. It's not a very good way to go around a room in the dark. Rituals can be like that, and you just don't know why you're doing it, what's the purpose, what's the point. And it can lull you into a false sense of feeling that you've done something religious towards your enlightenment, towards the end of suffering, but you haven't really promoted the qualities that you need to develop. Mindfulness, wisdom, insight. So again, the Buddha was often trying to get people to break free of their attachment to some of the Brahmin rituals of the time. And we still have that habit in this day and age, except for some of our rituals have changed. Maybe they're not so religious, they're just kind of social etiquette, social things, you know. I have to see the game on Saturday or else my weekend is no good. Rituals to do with relationships, rituals to do with I've got to go to the gym, I've got to eat the diet of my choice or else I won't feel good today. You know, food, we have a lot of rituals around that. So actually, you know, you can see there are some religious rituals, and in Buddhism, you know, that can happen. But there's also other aspects of life that we ritualize and become habitualized to, where we just turn off in our behavior. We're not fully mindful, we're not seeing the deeper underlying truths, and we just carry on following the ritual. So it's something to investigate in your life, what you do literally from moment to moment through your day, where you may be falling into habitual or ritualized behavior, the conventions of culture, society. And then, particularly in Buddhism, we'll home in on any kind of ritualized behavior to see if it's helpful to you and how you can use it to stimulate good qualities of mind. So, like a monastery, there's a fair amount of ritual. You may bow when you come into the meditation hall, like we do here. Well, that can be a useful thing. You bow with mindfulness. You stop, you bow down, bow your head down to the ground 3 times, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. That can be a way to bring up mindfulness in the present moment, reflect on Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, on good qualities of the Dhamma, and so on. Or you can just do it without realizing what you're doing. And you can bow 3 times, get up, walk away, and you didn't even remember that you bowed. And occasionally you see that, a monk, say, in a monastery, did we bow? Maybe a little bit dozy or just not mindful in that moment. Did I bow? How many times did I bow? 3 times? Sometimes that happens, doesn't it? So ritualized behavior in a monastery is an opportunity to develop good qualities of mind, but also one has to be careful not to just do things in a habitual way and feel somehow that one has progressed in the Dhamma when maybe one hasn't. Ajahn Chah used to say, if you bow mindfully, it will bring tears to your eyes. Maybe tears of joy, tears of letting go, rapture, physical and mental rapture, as you reflect on the Dhamma or one aspect of the Dhamma. So it can be a meditative experience, or you can just do it in a habitual, perfunctory way, and it doesn't really brighten your mind at all. Another question. Dear Lumpur, thank you for your teachings. I wish you well. Is there a difference between a mind that has achieved one-pointedness and a mind that has not, when contemplating the 3 marks of existence? Thank you. Well, I would say definitely there is a difference. maybe in the beginning of our practice we're not fully aware of what a mind that is one-pointed is like. So the difference between the one-pointed mind and the more ordinary states of mind that we try to contemplate, these three marks of existence, maybe it's not so clear to the practitioner in the beginning. But over time, the practitioner, the meditator, hopefully they become more skilled in focusing their mind on an object, letting go of the five hindrances, attaining to some calm for some periods of time, maybe briefly, maybe longer. And that gives you an insight into the peaceful mind, what it's like, what it's composed of. Say, when your mind experiences the peace of samadhi, even if briefly your mind goes beyond the hindrances, it's content, self-contained, steady, undistracted, unwavering. You can focus that mind to contemplate things. So the encouragement is to contemplate the three marks of existence: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not self, anicca, dukkha, anatta, what we call vipassana nowadays. Vipassana is the development of insight on the back of well-practiced mindfulness. So mindfulness is this quality that helps you pay attention. So you might develop mindfulness of breathing, as we chanted this evening. So when that's well-practiced, mindfulness comes up with the breath, but you can then turn to contemplate impermanence in the body, in the mind, in aspects of body and mind, or in one's experience. So one trains, for example, obviously the breath is just one meditation technique, but it's a very universal one. One develops mindfulness of breathing, first of all, just to develop mindfulness, but with the breath. Paying attention to the breath, knowing the breath, mindfulness can become very strong using the breath. But then one can turn to contemplate with the breath. Because mindfulness is established, one can contemplate feeling, the pleasant feelings that come when you let go of attachment to the body, to the hindrances. You get pleasant feelings, piti and sukha arise, the mind becomes more relaxed, the body becomes more relaxed. One can contemplate the impermanence of those states, and also the impermanence of painful feelings as well. As mindfulness improves and becomes sharper, one can contemplate, say, the impermanence of mental states, thoughts, mental states, wholesome ones, unwholesome ones. One becomes more adept at contemplating different states of mind, knowing when the mind is peaceful, when it's not. And one can also, as mindfulness improves, one's experience in practicing mindfulness of breathing, for example, it could be other meditations, one can become adept, skilled at contemplating cause and effect, Dhamma. How does suffering arise? How do I fall into states of suffering? How do painful feelings arise, unpleasant and pleasant feelings arise? How do states free from suffering arise? How does suffering arise? Where does it come from? So in studying and using mindfulness to investigate cause and effect and the way we attach with a sense of self to our experience. So perfecting anapanasati might bring one to be clear in the anatta laksana, knowing the characteristic of non-self in body, mind, in feelings, in mind, in all dhammas, in all thoughts, mental states. The experience of the emptiness of self may become more and more profound. But it's all on the back of the practice of mindfulness. We have to develop mindfulness in order to investigate successfully. When mindfulness is not yet well developed, we may have to be very patient in our practice because the mind keeps going into the hindrances. But you can still develop insight from that point. It's just hard work. So they have this term, the bare insight or the dry insight worker is often translated as that way. Somebody whose samadhi is not yet deep or well developed, but they have enough mindfulness to contemplate what's arising in front of them, their thoughts, the feelings, the body, the sensations, and so on. But mindfulness is not that strong or continuous, so their mind may still drop into hindrances all the time, but they keep bringing it back, so they're like a hard worker. That's why they call them a dry insight worker. They're a hard worker at bringing up the reflection on anicca, impermanence, in their thoughts, feelings, the body, sensations of the body, and so on. So it is one way one can develop insight. It's just hard work, working through the hindrances. So another way is just to develop a meditation skill with a meditation object, to develop the one-pointedness, and from there to contemplate. Because the one-pointedness frees the mind, so you can be very clear of the mind, what's coming up into the mind. You know the mind because the hindrances have gone quiet. And you can also know the body as it is. You know feelings as they are, the mind as it is. So there's definitely a difference between the mind of samadhi, the mind without samadhi, but never mind, you just keep going. And you use whatever samadhi you can develop and train in both samadhi and wisdom, insight. And sometimes the insight will lead the samadhi, sometimes the samadhi will lead the insight. Another question. Dear Luang Por, could you please kindly teach me the meaning of the word Sankara? I read a book which translated Sankara as mental fabrication and don't understand what it means. Well, Sankara is a term that can be used in a number of different ways in the Buddhist teachings. It can be used quite broadly, or it can be used a bit more specifically. So one of the most common times or descriptions of Sankara, or when the word is used, is when we describe the 5 khandhas, 5 aggregates or groups of experience that every human being has. So that's body, rupa, feelings, vedana, perceptions, sanya, mental formations, sankhara, and then sense consciousness, vijnana. So the 4th khandha, Sankara, is quite often translated, like in our chanting book, as mental formations. Can be translated as volitional formations, because that's pointing to the fact that Sankara khandha is where you make karma, good and bad. Intention also, so intentional action comes from the Sankara khandha. So volition, intention, or just mental formation, or sometimes even mental states, or sometimes mental fabrications. So fabrication just means something that is created, isn't it? You go to get a fabricator to make something, to produce something for you, in building and construction and so on. Sometimes they even use the word construction, so mental constructions. The idea is it's the part of the mind that creates, makes things, makes something of something, good or bad. So it's also where we talk about mental proliferation. Good proliferation, skillful sankharas, bad proliferation leading to suffering, unskillful sankharas. So it's this active part of the mind. But sankhara can also be used to describe a human as a whole. You just say we're a conditioned thing. So things that are created, fabricated, brought into existence, that includes a human being. So you can say a human being is a Sankara. It's made up of the physical part and the mental part, body and mind. But just as a building or a microphone or something that a person makes is a Sankara, it's a conditioned thing, it's brought into being by a human being acting on various elements to produce something. So, conditioned things, we say, things that depend on other things to come into existence. Conditioned things are Sankaras. So Nibbana is not a Sankara because it's no longer conditioned. It's not a conditioned thing, it's beyond the conditioning process. So it's beyond the 5 khandhas, it's not the 5 khandhas. The mind of an arahant is not conditioned. The mind of an arahant no longer makes karma, good or bad. The mind of the arahant no longer attaches to the body and mind as self. So they no longer make karma, they're no longer attaching to the thinking process as self. But the unenlightened person does. And that's where a lot of our trouble in life comes from. We attach to every thought as me, mine, myself. We identify it with, so it's a thought, puts you in a good mood. I am a really smart guy, person, man or woman. I'm good, I'm very good, I'm superb. Puts you in a good mood, but it's just a thought. It's a Sankara. Or I'm terrible, I'm miserable, I'm bad, I'm hopeless. Also a Sankara. Equal value when you establish mindfulness and insight into the 3 marks of existence, anicca, dukkha, anatta. Sankharas are put in a different way, looked at it a different way, and they're all impermanent. So Ajahn Chah said you can put them all in the same basket. So you can feel really good about yourself, really bad about yourself, good about the world, bad about the world, happy, unhappy. They all go in the same basket. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. Vipassana helps us to deal skillfully with sankharas. Otherwise, we tend to get the runaround from them. They cause us suffering. So the Buddha compared sankharas as the sankhara khandha, mental formations or mental fabrications, depending on your translation. He compared them with the banana tree. And the banana tree has no heartwood that you can cut down and take to make furniture or buildings. It just has this pulpy flesh that goes round in circles, and when you cut through it, it's empty. So sankharas are actually empty of self, they're nothing solid in themselves. They don't exist by themselves. They come into an existence through karma. So the arahant stops making sankharas so they don't get born again. So sankhara can cover a broad range of things, or we can focus in just on, say, wholesome sankhara, unwholesome sankhara, when we're talking about karma making, the karma making process. There's a very useful word, and it literally means something that is conditioned or brought into being dependent on different causes and factors. Lumpur, there are a few things I'm unsure of. Could you please help clarify? 1, what is the difference between conventional and ultimate truth? And could you kindly explain more about and what is Arya truth? So ultimate truth, we often translate it, in Pali it's Paramatta Satya. Satya means truth. Paramatta means higher, superior, absolute, ultimate truth. So there are ultimate truths in life, like the physical elements are considered part of ultimate truth, meaning they're just what they are: earth, air, fire and water, the different elements of nature. They just are there, and they're kind of ultimate truth. They just exist as they are. Of course, they can be made into things and moved around and they affect each other, but they just are there. They exist. Then there's quality of knowing, which is another element really, what we call vijnana dhatu. That's also an element. It just is. When I say that it just is, these physical and even the mental element of vijnana, they exist in the sense that they don't have to be a self, but we take them to be a self through ignorance. The mind creates this sense of self, and this applies to both physical and mental phenomena. Nibbana is a paramatta satya, an ultimate truth. Nibbana is just Nibbana. You can't really divide it into anything else, and it's not a conditioned thing. It doesn't get born, it doesn't die, it doesn't start, finish. It just is. The mind free from the delusion of self is Nibbana. So it's considered an ultimate truth. So these are sort of the basics, things that cannot be divided or explained further, really. I mean, language can't really explain the ultimate truth anyway, not effectively, but we use language, so it's convenient to talk about ultimate truth. But ultimate truth is really something just to be known. The four elements are to be known. Consciousness is just to be known. Nibbana is to be known. The more you talk about these things, the further away from ultimate truth you get. And then we have conventional truth, conventional reality, what we call samuti satya. And that is where language and concepts and ideas come in. And so that, for use of discussion and teaching the Dhamma, for helping people out of suffering to Nibbana, we still need language and concepts to pass on the Dhamma. So conventional reality has its role, but it's different from ultimate reality because conventional reality has to be in agreement, how we use words. So just as we were trying to define Sankara just now, we sometimes disagree on the way a word is defined or used, and that's the nature of conventional reality. We have the room for changes and opinions and views, and the sense of self comes in. So, for example, a chair. You can't see the chairs at the back of this hall, but I can. So a chair in English you call a chair. That's a convention reality in the sense that the ultimate reality of a chair is it's just various elements, solid elements, earth element, earth, air, fire and water filling a space. And space is also an element in the back of a hall, and there's a consciousness that can be aware of seeing the sight of a chair. But the actual name chair, that's something we agree on, humans create for convenience. But then you could call a chair, in Thai you'd say gao yi, or in another language, like in French you call it chaise, if I remember. We have different languages in the world, so in that society, that place, a language may be agreed on, but then in another place have another language. So conventional reality is like that. We can modify it, it can change with how we look at things, the views of things. So conventional reality is a very useful thing. It's agreed names and designations we have for looking at life, but at the same time it can also confuse us. It can be a cause of suffering when we attach to it. So my conventional reality may be different than yours, my language, my ideas, the way I think, the way you think, and so on. What I see as happiness, you may see as suffering. What you see as suffering, I may see as happiness, and so on. So conventional reality has its problems. It can be useful, but it can have its problems because it's a superficial labeling system we add on to experience, and that may vary from person to person. Arya Satya is the noble truth that enlightens the mind, takes suffering out of our experience. So the Arya truth is the truth that ennobles the mind, takes one from being an ordinary unenlightened human being to the state of Arya, beyond suffering. So we have 4 stages of Arya truth of Sotapanna, stream enterer, Sakatakami, once returner, Anagami, non-returner, and then Arahant, fully enlightened being. They have penetrated completely the 4 noble truths of suffering, its cause, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. So these truths, when taken and practiced and realized, they take the unenlightened mind to the state of Arya, what we translate as the noble mind. It can be man, woman, from any background, any age. The important thing is whether you penetrate these 4 noble truths or not. But when you do, then this ennobles the mind and frees it from suffering. So that's another kind of truth. There's ultimate truth, there's conventional truth, and then there's Arya truth that frees the mind from suffering. Last question tonight. What are the 6 elements in Buddhism? Do the elements of the Arahant differ from an ordinary person? Well, continuing on from that last question, there are 6 elements, which are the basic building blocks or things we find in nature. The 4 physical ones, earth, air, fire, water. The 5th is space, what the earth, air, fire, water sits in, because you couldn't have these physical elements if there was no space for them to sit in. But sometimes there's space between elements, so as science is constantly explaining, there's space between every atom, molecule, the tiniest particle you can find with equipment these days still finds there's space around whatever particle you're describing, protons, neutrons, electrons. There's always space around them. Or in a more obvious way, you can say, well, you have a room in a house or a hall like this that has a roof, has walls, has a floor, but there's a lot of space in between the walls and the roof and the floor. So space is another element. And then you have consciousness, the 6th element, vijnana, dhatu, vijnana element. It's the quality of knowing. And the unenlightened person knows wrongly because they know with a sense of self. They attach to this idea of self, me, mine, myself. They attach to the physical world, so we take ownership of a body, which is really just 4 elements, but we take ownership of it. Buildings, we take ownership, we buy them, sell them, we build them, create them. Land, we take ownership of land, say my land, but really land is just 4 elements, and so on. So consciousness, when it's untrained, undeveloped, immature, unenlightened, ignorant, conditioned by ignorance, creates a sense of self which takes ownership of the 4 elements and even the space. So we talk about the space race, and you go out into space, my space. Or perhaps a little closer to home, we say airspace. Our country owns this airspace around Australia, say, even though it's just air. But we say airspace is mine, or belongs to me, or my country. And we may even fight over airspace, or argue over it, and make rules and laws for other people coming into our airspace. But airspace is just space. It's just space element, isn't it? Or the air element in the space element. So the vijnana, the consciousness, knows wrongly, but it can be trained to know rightly. The Noble Eightfold Path, or the Arya Satya Dhamma, when it knows rightly, no longer does it take ownership of the 4 elements as self. So one lets go of attachment to the body. That's why we talk about A non-returner or an arahant doesn't get reborn again with a body because there's no more delusion and attachment taking body as self. And even the subtlest mental concepts, states of samadhi, perceptions, thoughts, ideas, the arahant no longer attaches to them as self. So their vijnana, consciousness, is free from self, free from delusion. They still have vijnana, but it's no longer my vijnana, it's just vijnana, it's just knowing. So think about it, the arahant, they don't attach to the four elements of self, meaning they have no difference in their view between the building, the person, the trees, the mountains, the air, equal. We say their consciousness doesn't alight, set down on anything, claiming it as self. What a human beings like to do normally is make everything as belonging to me, mine, myself. So we take ownership, and the more we own, the better we feel, usually, although it does bring a lot of worries, owning a lot. So be warned, be careful. Why do we have conflicts and wars in the world? Because we're fighting over land and resources, sometimes over ideals even, very invisible things. You can still have a sense of self attaching to a belief system or an ideal. But the consciousness of an arahant doesn't do that anymore. It's equal. All people are equal, all material things are equal. They're equal in their non-attachment. No more suffering, no more birth for the arahant. So there are 6 elements, the 4 physical ones, space and then consciousness. They have them, but the mind is no longer generating this sense of self in those 6 elements. So the mind is free. It's not delighting in or averse to the world. There's no need for arguments, wars, suffering for the arahant, and no more need for birth. Their mind is free, literally roams free, doesn't alight on anything as self. The only one who can know that, though, is the arahant. One who's still stuck in self will not yet know the mind of an arahant. You can't buy that knowledge, you can't make or force someone to give you that knowledge. You have to practice to attain it, and that's one of the biggest obstacles. We haven't done that yet. Even if we're trying, we may not have done that yet, or even if we're not trying, we're just deluded and don't see the value of it. But the Buddha would say the arahant is the happiest person in the world because their mind is not attached to anything. While they're alive, they still have their 5 khandhas, their body, their mind, so they still have these elements, but only as a temporary thing, and when they die, they all split apart and they're gone. So those are the questions for tonight and the answers. We wish you well with your practice, and we'll see you again next time.